interdependent stuff, but yeah, we'll just jump in, get it going. So, again, just a little bit of my history. I got to MSG back in 2012. Obviously, been there ever since. Kind of worked through combining the programs and kind of getting into where it's at today with Coach Turgeon, Mike Turgeon, who is our director. Again, mentorship-wise, I mean, there's a lot of great people that I've had the chance to communicate with and just kind of be around and learn from as well. And a lot of it is USATF and USTF CCCA influence. So if you have taken some of these classes or have the opportunity to, they're obviously all great resources. And then Altus is kind of coming along with some really great stuff as well now. So I'm definitely someone that is going to keep diving into these opportunities as well myself and giving back whenever I can, for sure. So, plan for today now. I don't have Paul in here. Paul, is Paul in here? No, okay. Paul was here the first session. He was one of our former athletes. We'll kind of talk now the themes and everything we talked about in the first one. We'll talk how that distributes through an annual plan or a full season. Some of the basic periodization models and some of the different names for everything. Kind of what a high school versus college plan would look like. You know, high school is very similar to college, just very much so accelerated. You know, being about a third the length, depending on how much indoor stuff you do and if your kid's doing club and all that kind of stuff. Then just troubleshooting and some of the things that I've had to be a little flexible with over the years. So the first part was obviously knowing the training theory. Next part is kind of backwards planning. So figuring out what our end goal is and obviously working our way back to whatever our start date is and kind of understanding where you're at in the plan along the whole spectrum. You know, I'm often reminding our athletes as we have, you know, a little frustrations here and there early season competing, you know, just being impatient, I guess. I always kind of remind them of where we're at in the plan. You know, we just came off a recovery week, this week where everything was much lighter. And now we're really starting to see the benefits of that as we push forward. So I'm excited to get today and tomorrow up and running down in Mankato here and get some good marks down. But again, talking kind of one peak versus two peaks, setting up our mesocycles, which are kind of our month-long training themes, sorting out the weeks and kind of looking at the actual training session within itself. So this is obviously very small. If you want this, I can send it to you so you can look at it. But this is what a whole annual plan for our college season looks like. There'll be some other shorter ones that I'll kind of show as an example as well. But this is kind of the third week of school. Each one of these columns is a week in our plan. And we are in week 22. So we're kind of halfway through the indoor season and pressing on to conference and nationals. And then, you know, this is kind of one big long peak here. And then we have the second peak. You know, indoor and outdoor are the same length. We just have this long fall, obviously, that we build in. So obviously in the high school ranks, you know, our entire fall is about 14 weeks. That's about the length of, obviously, the high school season. So we'll talk about how that would just be similar progressions, but just everything being accelerated and using the meets to cover some of your bases as well. So again, general thoughts with it, you know, this is how this starts, this is how it kind of finished. So I mean, we fill in everything, but we have to understand obviously our length of our season, how many peaks we have. If we are doing an indoor, is indoor a separate deal, or are we just using that as the beginning of our season? I know some states are obviously having a separate state indoor championship and all that kind of stuff. I'm not aware of that here. Obviously, we host a large invite kind of right at the end of what indoor would be, kind of mid-April or early April, and that's kind of a little bit of a peak, I guess, and then you build an outdoor depending on the weather. But again, I know there's a lot more USATF, AAU stuff going on, and a lot more people are getting involved with that, which has been a good thing for our sport, obviously. And then just knowing important dates, how we're qualifying for section meets, how we're qualifying for state meets, and just understanding when we need to be ready to go for those. So when we look down, kind of as we work through these next slides, we're going to start kind of holistically at the top and work our way down into each smaller and smaller subsection. So we're going to start with periods. So the periods are kind of the two major focuses. We have a preparatory phase and we have a competition phase. So as we look back, you know, obviously we have indoor and outdoor season. Then in the periods we have preparatory, pre-comp kind of comes into play, and competition. So preparatory is everything obviously just leading up to the season. If you're already competing in week 3 or week 4 of the high school season, your prep phase might still only be 4 weeks, might extend to 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever, until we get into our main meets. or we're just doing some time trials or inter-squad meets or something in the beginning of the year. But with that being said, prep is split into general preparation and specific prep, and then we're learning aspects of what it takes to be successful in events. We're teaching technical models and kind of teaching the more biomechanics side of what we're trying to do. We're introducing the jump events or the throw events or whatever it is, depending on what event your athletes are in. Then in the competition, obviously that's when everything shifts to competition being the forefront. Training then during the weeks is really generally more recovery in nature, increasing focus for the next big competition that we have or the next competition opportunity. And then we're obviously filling in kind of the gaps as well. So we know that we have all these meets, those count as workouts as we talked about. So how do we fill in the gaps and how do we fill in our weeks if we're still learning concepts or now we're just focused on recovery, if we're talking conference to sections, to state, all that kind of stuff. So from the periods then, these get broken into these as we've kind of talked about. General prep is more of a potentially conditioning phase, or if you're getting somebody from basketball a little bit late, or gymnastics a little bit late, you might just kind of rep through general prep, might spend a week kind of just generally getting them back going again. Again, it could be 1 to 2 weeks, or we're using some sort of strength conditioning during the winter to kind of prep them and get ready to go to train. Specific prep would be more introduction of event-specific needs, whether it be blocks, how to accelerate. We're doing that a little bit in general prep, but again, we're just making sure when we have, 80 to 200 athletes show up on day one, are we throwing them right into a workout, or are we going to get them going and kind of assess where we're at? Pre-competition, again, this might be early season that we're still training and working through concepts, but we're still competing, so some of those races or meets that we're training into shape or racing through, or ones that maybe not as big of a focus. Obviously I know in Minnesota we have true team sections, true team state, all that kind of stuff. 2-3 weeks before the actual section meet and state meets. So, if that's a huge focus for you, then, we might have to be a little bit heightened a little bit earlier, and then hope obviously that we're continuing to press on into the more team championships and individuals and whatnot. So, again, the length of all of these totally get dictated by what the season, what your length is. So, I have an 8-week general prep. Then we kind of go into a 7 to 8 week specific prep. We have our first December meet. Most colleges will have some sort of a December meet. We have an inter-squad mixed in there as well. And we don't really have a pre-comp phase till we go to winter. In college, the worst time for a college coach is winter break, because we don't get to see our people for, 3-4 weeks. So we have no idea how they come back. So sometimes this is adjusted slightly based off that. But competition-wise now, everything we're doing during the week is just prepping us for the next competition. So there's not a whole lot of workouts where we're just crushing them or anything like that. We're focused on competition and taking everything we need training-wise and progressing through from there. Okay, so this was a specific plan that I did. Sorry, I stopped using my laser pointer. I had that one time, the feedback was you used too much laser. So I was like, okay, so I'll stop with that. But again, Miles was a hurler for us. He did have an indoor. He only had outdoor eligibility left his last year. So he came and we worked through a bit of an accelerated plan. So this was 17 weeks in total. So again, we had meets early on, even if we were still in prep, we were still having meets. It was just more of a, let's see where we're at, let's see what we need to work on, where are our deficiencies and all of that, and then that prepped us into some bigger races as we worked through. We had nationals, but we obviously knew we had to fill this gap all the way from our outdoor nationals when we were peaked and ready to go. He won nationals this year. We had a whole 6-7 week period where we kind of had to work back into Olympic trials and some other things. So again, this might be the length of your high school season here, and then your kids are doing some summer stuff that you might be coaching them in or somebody else. So we just have to look at what we have time frame, and we can build this document out however we need to, however we see fit, based off what our situation is. So distribution, this is just kind of a generalized look. This is straight from USA Track and Field Level 2 manual. So these are a lot of the concepts that we talked about in our first session today on this topic. So the one right before. And then this is how you would distribute it through an annual plan or through a whole season. So some of the stuff we talked about, the higher level, as we worked from the edges to the center, the higher level meet specific training. You don't see those present at all in the first general prep periods that we talked about. So we see a lot of capacity work, which we talked about kind of building a bigger bucket in the first session. We're building our capacity to handle work, and speed work initially from the get-go. All of those things are on right away when we train. We don't just start hammering 400s as hard as we can day one, right? So then these other training themes start to take more of a precedent as we work further and further into competition. So this is just a one peak season, so if you were just doing one season, this would be more of an indoor-outdoor. Again, general themes of when things will obviously turn into, or being the forefront, so like long speed endurance. So this is like prep work for the 200, the 400, relays, all that kind of stuff. We're not really doing that until we get into the competition phase. We're doing some building into it, but that doesn't ever come here, because then again, as we talked about, where do you progress to? So this is kind of a general progression and distribution of training throughout, something that you guys can look at back at the slides and everything. And if they're not given to you through the presentation or through the clinic, just email me and I can send them to you. So mesocycles, so the segments of training that are based on a progressive or blocked theme, and we'll get into the differences there. Generally, they're going to be 2 to 6 weeks based on the schedule. A 6-week phase, if you have 6 weeks and you don't know what to do with the 6, you can break it into 2 3-week blocks. We'll talk about how we progress through that. Most often, you'll see a 4-week phase, though, so a month long. Just as our microcycles are weeks, 7 days, we run in obviously a kind of week-to-week model in the U.S. So 7-day training blocks and month-long training blocks make a lot of sense. So the training intensities generally progress throughout the entire month-long block. And then again, where are we progressing to? The last week, usually in each block, is some sort of rest or restorative week. Again, in the first one, we talked about adaptation happens in 21 to 27, roughly day windows. So that's 3 or 4 weeks of building a specific theme. Then you need time for the body to catch up, and then you're able to stress them at the next level, or stress the body at the next level. So you would kind of see this building pattern, kind of working your way up, rest week, building your way up, rest week, and so on and so forth. Now the rest weeks don't mean that you have to be down on intensity. It's more so a volume. So we were in a rest week this week. We still had a very intense workout, a speed endurance ladder that we did on Tuesday. We came back from competing. Monday was a lighter day. We hammered a speed endurance ladder. Wednesday was pool. Thursday was pre-meet for some people that are racing. If you're only racing Saturday, you have another kind of longer pre-meet day mixed in there. So it's kind of general. We still hammered that one high intensity, but it was 120, 80, and a 60. So the volume wasn't very high, but we're still getting a neuromuscular hit in there. And some would say, okay, we still need to compete hard. We still need to do this. We have 23 weeks of backing behind that. So I'd much rather in a recovery week really, really focus on recovery and making sure that we're feeling happy and healthy, which is always a goal for our athletes. So there's kind of 2 different styles of it. A block would be a mesocycle, each with a specific theme, and you have a concurrent plan working through each one. So a block could be, my first block is always acceleration and work capacity. So we have a theme. Most of the speed days are going to work acceleration work, and all the tempo days are going to work capacity work. So we would have the, go ahead, you come in. We would have the intensities that would fall in with those. In a rotational setup though, you have mesocycles that are comprised of themed microcycles or themed weeks. So you would have a speed week, and everything would reflect speed. You have a power week, everything reflects power. You have a capacity week, everything reflects capacity. This to me makes a lot more sense just in how I think and how I plan. We have a concurrent plan, and we're working on that big chart that we showed in the first one, and everything's working upwards. And we'll have some undulations, yes. But it's not like this one's on, this one's off, this one's on, this one's off. There are some successful coaches that do rotational plans. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it doesn't mean they don't work. So again, for 4 weeks in the fall, if we're doing an acceleration block or acceleration theme, each one of the speed workouts are acceleration focused. Whereas you'd see a little bit more undulation with the rotationals. So general progressions through your mesos or your month-long training periods. General to specific, simple to complex. Capacity, again, we're building a bigger bucket so we can dump more stuff in it, kind of a deal, which is capacity to power. We're progressively loading throughout the 3 weeks, and then we unload, obviously, the 4th week, and then work capacity towards race modeling, and that's kind of more specific to where we're at in the season. And then these are, the bottom ones are the general progressions that you would go through each theme. So this would be more of a neuromuscular theme, a tempo theme, plyometric theme, and weight room theme. You kind of work through those different themes as you go through. So progressions are important because by the time you're to the end, this should be the most specific race day type intensities. Your practices should look like race modeling. We're trying to put them in scenarios where they feel different things in the race. This isn't when we just do a bunch of general tempo or general acceleration work because we're competing at a high level at that point. So microcycles, usually 7 days. Just in our system, it makes the most sense. Sometimes there's longer ones, kind of depending if you have a big invitational and then you don't have another one for another 10, or when you're in that true team state world where then you come back and have sectionals, whatever, you might have a longer block within that, but it just kind of depends. So to me, this is kind of where the art of coaching starts. You kind of know all your stuff, you know all your themes. Now how do we pack it into your weeks? How do we pack it into the mesos? So this is how this starts to come into play. So when we look at holistic concerns, we look for compatible training. So that's more so within a session, within a day of practice. Are the things that we're putting in there complementary to each other? Sorry, I won't use not the wrong term. Are they compatible with each other as far as are we doing high intensity work with other high intensity work? And then same thing would go for like a tempo day. If we're doing 70% tempo, are we matching that with something intensity-wise in one of those secondary themes, whether it be circuit style lifting or a general strength circuit or hurdle mobility or something like that. Complementary training would be more so selecting the order of themes to enhance the overall effect. So that would be more so how do your days stack on top of each other. So if I have a speed day, am I coming back with another speed day, coming back with a tempo day, a general day, or right after a workout, or right after a meet, am I coming back with a really hard workout the next day on a speed day? So now how we're complementing the days within the plan. And there'll be some examples coming up here. So there's a couple ways that we can group things: neuromuscular demand, metabolic demand, power output, technical commonality, or rhythmic demand, and that'll be what we go through here. So neuromuscular demand is pretty simple. It's just pairing highs with highs and pairing lows with lows, and then having proper recoveries within those themes. So we talked about neuromuscular. If we're going to do a hard speed day or a hard acceleration day, am I going to have 48 hours in between that and the next time I do that? So that's the proper recoveries are, again, equally as important as whatever the theme is. So examples of this, we could do speed development with multi-jumps. Again, highly intensive items, jumping as high, as far as you can go, bounding, that kind of stuff. Speed development with Olympic lifting, again, explosive movements. Even though the intensity of, or the load of an Olympic lift is, in that 70% world, we're still trying to move it explosively. Speed development with multi-throws. Again, multi-throws would be throwing a med ball as far and as hard as you can in various planes. General strength would pair well with a med ball circuit. The med ball circuit's more general in nature. And then tempo running with any sort of like circuit lifting. So think of it as like pairing wine with food. I know that's a big thing for wine drinkers. Certain wines pair with better things, or with foods better. Some people just drink wine with whatever food. That's fine too, but again, they can enhance each other, at least people think that. So grouping by metabolic and energy demand. This kind of falls again into the intensity. Alactic stuff, so high intensity stuff that we're not producing lactate as a byproduct. Alactic, so without lactic. High demands with other high neural things. So again, speed development, multi-throws. We're not trying to build any sort of lactate. We're not trying to get any sort of an endurance effect. We're trying to be explosive and rest a lot in between those. High glycolytic, high intensity circuits, early season. We'll do some different circuits where we're running back and forth. We're doing straight leg bounds back and forth over longer distances, and we're pairing them with general strength stuff, or general strength exercises in between, and there's not a whole lot of rest, just kind of back and forth and kind of work. We're building capacity of the glycolytic system. They're not that fun of circuits, but again, we're building that base level, kind of building that bucket bigger. And then, mild glycolytic work with mild glycolytic work. That would be kind of a recovery day. What are we going to do on a recovery day, and does everything we pick, is it recovery focused? Grouping by power. So again, short and long power output time frames. So again, that would be more of a glycolytic circuit like I talked about, one that we're trying to build some lactate. You're not supposed to feel very good in it. Then a power circuit, one where we're trying to build power, where it's explosive movements with a lot of rest. So we can pair things by that. Do we pair lifting with a multi-jump? Do we do something, elastic equivalent training, basically? We do some sort of lift and we pair it with some sort of plyo right afterwards. Do we get a better effect out of it? So things that we would want to think about are our power outputs matching. Do I want to go run a bunch of tempo, then try to do a high intensity lift right afterwards? They probably don't pair very well, because again, one is looking for lower power outputs and one's looking for higher power outputs. So we get that sometimes. We have a pretty hard pressed lifting schedule because we have all the athletes working through the weight room. So sometimes we lift Monday, Wednesday. If my main workout's Tuesday, I either cancel Wednesday and we move the lift from Monday to Tuesday, or we have to modify the lifting because we have a recovery day Monday, but we're still lifting. So we kind of have to play around with that a little bit. So your facility constraints might also play into this. And yes, you can bend it at certain times, like, okay, we're early in the season, we're just going to still lift this day, and then we're going to compete again, or we're going to practice hard next day. But as we get closer and closer to the championship season, we want to pair that stuff best we can. Because if you do say, oh, I'm only going to train hard on Tuesday, but then you're working with a strength coach that has them loaded up on Monday, Wednesday, you're assuming, oh, I only worked out once, we should be fresh. But then they got crushed in the weight room as well, and you weren't there because you had another group. You just got to be aware of that. We hired a new weight coach this year, and again, I write it with her. She was adding in a whole bunch of stuff. Things were taking like an hour and a half in the weight room, and I was just so confused. I was like, what the hell? Why is everybody so tired? And then I looked at the weight room, and I was like, oh my God, that's why. Because I have all my groups in a row, and then they just go to the weight room afterwards, and that person handles them. But so we took a little bit more control back over that. So grouping by technical commonality. So again, further ingraining some of the concepts we're teaching. Acceleration development pairs well with sled pulls. So sled pull is acceleration development, but it's not the same as just blasting out. Doing some sort of resisted run is going to help you in acceleration, so those things pair well. Again, we're not doing tempo and then running sleds afterwards. They don't pair well, the themes don't pair well. Acceleration development with lateral hops or lateral jumps. Acceleration is really the only time we're in double support pushing. So anything that we're double support, under forward med ball throws or multi-throws or back over our heads, where we're pushing off both legs. That pairs well with acceleration development. Speed with vertical jumps. So speed is more focused on vertical pushing into the track. So anything vertical jumping wise pairs well with that. Block development and single leg plyos. Yes, you are full support or double support, but after a fraction of a second, you're back in single support, so we're pressing off one leg, so single leg plyos works well with that, and so on and so forth. We also can do complexes, which is a concept that Gabe Sanders, he's the director at Boston University, he kind of made a little bit more famous, or at least in the Twitter world. I think Twitter is, what I think is big on Twitter might not be big anywhere else, but complexes, you do, for example, we'll do one where we do wall attacks, so we'll do basically different acceleration positions in a wall in a standing situation. Then we'll go do a sled pull for 20 meters. We'll give them 2 minutes. Then we run through wickets. We give them 4 minutes, and then we just do a blasted fly run. So we worked on positioning, worked on accelerating with that position, worked on taking that position into an upright wicket run, and now we throw it all together without any extra modality. So you do that in order, take rest, repeat it. So you're ingraining a teaching model as you're doing practice. So complexes can be really good. And you can get super creative with them. You're trying to pair things together that make sense and work through a model that you're trying to build. And then rhythmic demand, stuff like wickets running over the miniature hurdles at certain distances pairs well with max velocity, because that's when you're running over wickets at max velocity. Heavier sleds and acceleration development, overcoming resistance and acceleration development. Hurdling, obviously, there's rhythmic demands with that, so we can try to mimic the positions or the rhythms that we're trying to feel in drilling and all of that. So again, then how do we cue those positions as well? If I'm trying to get a certain rhythm out of our hurdlers, can I put them in a scenario in a drill that mimics that, and I can best use that then? Or I'll use it a lot with wickets. At this point, as we progress through, we should feel as if we're going over wickets. We don't have wickets there, but they know what it feels like to go over wickets. That helps me ingrain good technical models. So again, just different things to think of it. And this is more on the planning side. This is not something that's necessarily going to play out when you're at practice, but more so planning how you're going to pair things together and how it makes the most sense. So with this too is, I kind of, it's a big annual plan, so I'll create the annual plan, but I still write training week to week. I used to do it month by month, and then I found that I was changing a bunch of stuff because, it's a pretty fluid atmosphere. So I'll always write week to week. Within the same plan, I'm always looking at the annual plan, but then I know what we've done before, how we looked, and then we know how to progress from there. So I think there's been a little bit of a push with young coaches as well, like, oh, I got to get my whole year plan done and all this kind of stuff, but, if the flu rips through your team for a week, then your whole plan's screwed. So you spend all that time writing all that, but you got to reset yourself and restart. So I wouldn't waste the time of writing all this stuff. I would make an annual plan, but then just work week to week if you have time. I used to write it on Sundays, then I got married and have a kid, so I write it on Fridays now. So I don't have to try to write it on Sunday when I got everything else going on. So, but no, I at least take the time to think about it and go week to week. Density is obviously how much you're stacking into a week. Complexity is more so the degree of demand for your activities. So general stuff would be less complex than stuff that you're going to be doing later on. And then obviously the psychological effect of when you're throwing all this in, how are the athletes going to actually respond to this as well? So, that's always going to play, especially as we're getting into competition. If we came off a weekend where we might not have hit the times that we wanted to, or we feel a little down, are we going to be jacked up for Monday to train? I don't know. So do we do something that kind of works us into the week a little bit better? Or shoot, you got a big test, or you guys are doing some sort of testing in your school or something, and everybody's just kind of down. How can we adjust our week to maybe line it up a little bit better? Okay, quantifying indexing, we don't have to spend too much time on this. This is just making sure you have some sort of way to look back and know what you did. So whether it's going to be sets and reps, or if you're tracking overall volumes for a day, if you have an online program, we use Team Builder, if you've heard of that, for the weight room, so we can kind of track, obviously, throughout how much weight they're doing. I use an online program for all of our writing, so it's easy to track. I can go back to 2012 in September and see what we were doing, because it's all cataloged. So it's more so just having a plan, even if it's writing it on a Word document or putting it down on paper, just some sort of way that you can look back and see whether that be year to year, month to month, or seeing how you're progressing through. So I tell you, we're in the thick of it. I couldn't tell you what we did 2 weeks ago, but I can just go onto the program and tell you, or look what we did, so that I can always factor that in. Because when you got big groups, things disappear pretty quick. Okay, so contrast and rest and setting up. So adaptations happen when stressed in a specific fashion, so an intensity-wise, or whatever our theme is, with the subsequent rest. So repeated stress without proper rest will send athletes into regression over time. So that was kind of that undulation look. We're going to stress them, they go down a little bit, we give them the appropriate time, they adapt, we stress them again, adapt, stress and adapt. So neuromuscular rest, 48 to 72 hours is kind of the rough plan with that. 1 day of recovery after one session. If you're going to do 2 consecutive sessions, where you have a double back-to-back meet, 2 days, prelims and finals, then you would come back with 2 days, generally speaking, of recovery or different type theme stuff. So again, recovery for neuromuscular work, you could do tempo, you could do general strength. It doesn't just mean off. You can just do stuff that's not 90% plus intensity-wise. Metabolic tempo rest, we talked a little bit. 25 hours is usually suffice in demand, but it kind of depends as you get into the upper intensive tempo, kind of the lower end special endurance, where you're doing some of that more race day type tempo work. Maybe for your 400 kids or your 800 folks, you might need a little bit more than just 24 hours. It kind of depends on the intensity, but a general tempo day in the 70s, 80s, low 80s% world, really 24 hours you'll be able to double back. So this could be some examples. You do a neuro day, followed by a tempo day, followed by rest, or a recovery day, and then a neuro and a tempo. This is the first 8 weeks of what I do. We don't have any meets or anything like that, and we have some NCAA rules with the amount of time we do, so that's why Wednesday is a recovery day. We usually have a film study day, we film everything. So we'll go through some different things in a meeting standpoint, and then we're lifting Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So although we are resting, our confines from our weight room, we can't lift Thursday, but I'd rather do this so I can knock out a few more days of training because I don't do anything on the weekends. But again, there's some people that do stuff on weekends, that just gives them an hour of the day. I need time away from people. So Example 2 would be more in the season. We might do a neuro day, have a rest day or recovery day, come back with a neuro day, do a tempo day, and then another neuro. So this might be, as we get into specific prep, as we want to start turning it up a little bit, this might just be like a block day or something, this might be a higher intensity neuro day, then we have a rest. This might just be a lighter neuromuscular day, just to kind of double back. We do our big tempo day for the week, and then we come back Friday, maybe do hill accelerations or something like that. But again, these aren't with any competition, but this could be 2-day-a-week meets. You know, I have a meet here, rest, I have a meet again, and then we come back and actually get some training in before the weekend. This totally depends on your setup and however you want to set it up. Or how you're dictated to set it up, I guess, with your schedule. So this would be a 2-week or 2-peak model in a week, a micro. So again, this could be kind of building towards a Wednesday, building back up towards this would be a Saturday, a 6-day week. Or we could have it where we build up to 1 peak and then kind of work down, but we have some more medium intensity days. This is probably a little bit more easy to look at in this realm. A single competition week would be working towards this kind of the college model, where we build up and then we kind of recover and get a little bit lighter into the competition. Or this could be more the high school setup. We have some days leading up to the competition, and the only days that we're at high intensity are the competition. Depending on what you're doing, those are phenomenal workouts. So we have to factor that in. We can't just do 2 more weeks of super high intensity stuff and then compete and repeat that over and over again. So that's why, again, planning out your weeks around your meets are obviously going to be important. So this is touching back a little bit on day 1, and then we're going to get into some specific plans. We have a small screen though, so when I get to the specific plans, you'll be like, oh my god, this is really small text, but we'll get to it. Sequencing, we always talked, the first one, we go from this end down to here. So we start with absolute speed and acceleration, work our way through speed endurance, and then you eventually hit special endurance, which is kind of the middle ground. Acceleration development, speed development, and speed endurance kind of follow these parameters here and in here. So we're progressively building. We look for proficiency before moving on. So we're looking for proficiency. We're not just moving on from acceleration if we haven't learned how to really properly accelerate yet. We're going to have to spend more time working on that because the quality of your max velocity always depends on your acceleration. So it doesn't just mean that we set this thing up and then no matter what, we're just plowing through it. We obviously have to write, that's why I write week to week so we understand where we're at and how we're adapting and how we're picking up some of this stuff. So then on the other side of it, we work continuous tempo and work up. So the people in the first one, the speed part from the previous slide is up here. So we work down to up, and we work top down, and eventually meet in the middle. So we're building through tempo by building intensity over time, some sort of tempo or aerobic work throughout the year. Once you're into competition for sprinters, your aerobic work is pretty much recovery days. We're doubling back on circuits and different things that we can do to address the aerobic concern. But also you got to think warm-ups every day are going to be aerobically driven. Lifting, there is still some aerobic component to lifting as well. So we're getting a lot of bang for our buck in aerobic work over time. But again, to see actual gains in 60s, 100s, 200s, speed work is going to be the main driver of all of that. Special endurance, how you meet in the middle. So we work from down below, we work from acceleration to the top, we meet in special endurance in the middle, and that's the most taxing race-specific type stuff. So that might just be your meets, or that might be a few kind of well-placed workouts leading into your meets so that you're prepped and ready to go. But there's probably not too many scenarios where a new high school athlete or even a new college athlete feel overly ready and prepped for the first meet. Sometimes it's just thrown at you and you just got to go do it. And even in college, we have that long build-up, but man, 12 weeks goes by pretty quick, and then we're already pushing into our first meet. We haven't even done blocks for more than 2-3 weeks, you know? So sometimes you just got to throw yourself into it and see how it goes, and then that can help dictate from there. Okay, so as you can tell, very small writing, but I'm going to talk through some of this. And this will be stuff that I can send you after the fact. This is basically the printouts from the program that I use. So just sequencing certain days. Let me see. Okay. So this would be N is neuro, a neuro day, T is tempo, R is rest, G is general. So I'm going to let you guys just look back at this part because I have some more individual days coming up. That'll make a lot more sense. But if you followed through this plan, this would be Monday. This would be more of a neuro day. Tuesday, everything would represent kind of a tempo workout. We would have a rest on a Wednesday. We'd come back Thursday and have another neuro day. And then we would have hills on Friday, which are our tempo. So if I look through this, we did 5 times 20, 5 times 30 accelerations. We did some 150s basically on the minute and a half. So in the grass, we set up a big grass track. Wednesday we had a film day and we lifted. Thursday we came back with some wicket runs and some max velocity runs. And then Friday we were on the hill doing more of a tempo type setup. So that would have been a general prep. Again, this is a lot, but when you can actually spend the time to read through it. So neuro day, this was, we did block starts, we did some more max velocity work. Tuesday we came back with a tempo circuit. So we did some tempo runs within a circuit, because this is as we're getting closer to competition. Then we came back Wednesday and we did starts again. We did some hurdle work, we did some fly runs. Thursday would have been a lighter pool day, and then Friday we had a hard tempo day, so kind of upper level intensive tempo, and that would all be intensity wise on there. Pre-comp, you can see the end of the weeks get pretty chill because we are competing. So we came in the beginning of the week, we did some harder, Monday we had nothing, we had recovery, so this would have been after a meet. So we'd had nothing that day, so we probably traveled back on Sunday, so we had Monday off. Tuesday we came in with some recovery. We did a neuro day, and then we were back to competing again on Friday. So we traveled Thursday, and then we went again for another meet. And then this would have been a competition weekend, or week. So we get a little bit more dense riding-wise, because more groups get split off at that point. But then obviously the meets are at the end. So this will be a little bit more applicable though, because we might be able to see some of this at least. So if you can't, I'm just going to talk you through it. So neuromuscular plan, this would be an example of a practice session early on in the season. This warm-up here is called the early season rudiment series. So it's an ascending warm-up, so it gets more intense as you work through it. Everything gets a little bit more complex as you go through it. It looks like a lot, but this is also when we're teaching all of these drills, we're going through technique. So we might spend 45 minutes going through all this, 45 minutes to even, a little bit longer than that. But this is where we're doing all of our teaching that we'll rely back on throughout the rest of the season. We'll always reference back stuff from this beginning document. So I'll send out a video beforehand that has all the examples of this. They have a general idea of what it's going to look like. We walk them through, good to go. After we do that, we go into a neuro-themed workout. This is 5 times 20, 5 times 30 accelerations. For the 20s, we did a toe trap drill that we call, or a heel trap now. I kind of changed the name because it makes more sense. Where we use just a board on the back of your heels, so you have to have low heel recovery. So again, intense work, but it's short distance, it's excel work. So yes, it's intense, but after 5 times 20, 5 times 30, you're not going to be dead. I mean, you've been taxed, yes, but you can walk off just fine. And then we did some baby bounds, so some multi-jumps, that kind of work up intensity over time, and then we lifted. This whole plan takes about an hour and a half, because I have 2 main groups in the fall. So one group goes, they go to the weight room, next group comes, they go to the weight room, and then the day is done. So this would have been more specific prep. As you can see now, we have a little bit of a shortened, more max velocity themed warm-up. Everything in the max velocity themed one is going to be more upright and tall, because that's max velocity. Putting pressure underneath the hips, attacking underneath the hips. So it's a lot of standing, A switch positions, different A things as you work through. Not really the scope of what we're doing, it's just a max velocity warm-up. We go into a max velocity session, which is some dribble runs. We did a complex, you did a dribble run, you did a wicket run after that, and then you do a fly run, so kind of one of those complexes where you work through the concepts. So we looped through that 4 times with some decent recovery, 5 minutes in between each one. And then the hurdlers had some starts through and all that. We had no cool down this day because we went straight to the weight room. Pre-comp, so now we're getting into competition. You can see we worked through the max velocity warm-up again. Short hurdlers had starts through 1, 2, 3, and then they had some hard max velocity sprints afterwards. Hurdlers never get up to max speed in a hurdle workout. Men are about 75% of max speed. Women are closer to 90 of their max speed. So it's important that we always do max velocity or hard sprints after hurdles. Because hurdling is neuromuscularly driven, but you're not working max velocity because you have the constraints of the hurdles. So we always pair back starts with, we did 120 that day and an 80, because this is pre-comp, so this was January when we were back competing already. The rest of them had some broken runs, so some more special endurance 1 type stuff, because this was January 16th, the Thursday, so we would have a meet on the 18th coming back on that Saturday. So we would have had a lighter day in between and just go from there. And then an example of a competition session. So now, after we come off a workout or a meet, we kind of have a little bit of a recovery in the early part of the week. We might hit one. So this was before the NSIC challenge. This year would have been 2 weeks before conference. So we come back and we did some shorter acceleration starts in a chase drill setup, so staggered starts, so you have to feel yourself around other people in your starts. And then we did a couple in and out runs. Nothing crazy though, just kind of get a neuromuscular hit on the day, but we're not trying to be tired, not trying to do anything like that. We're trying to get a hit, and then we did some handoffs and some multi-throws, and we're back off, ready to go. So I put these full plans in here because when you look back through, you can actually kind of go detail-wise through, and I put some notes on what I was thinking at this point. Same thing now with tempo. So tempo early season general prep. Did a mobility jog, did a dribble series, so we worked on some dribbling, a whole series of dribble exercises. So again, upright, tall. When we're in tempo running, we still have to be technically sound. We can't just tempo run like this because we want to. You know, we're still ingrained in good technical patterns. And then we did those 150s. We were at probably 70% because this is September, so this is first week. So we were at 70% extensive tempo, and then we did some hurdle mobility afterwards. Specific prep, as we worked end of fall, this is November, as we start to push indoors, now with the weather. We did a general warm-up that had some tech runs as a part of it, and kind of worked through some general movements, and then we did a tempo at, men were running 200s at 26, so that's like 80-ish%. So we did a decent amount of volume that day, but that would have been intensive tempo, and then we did hurdle mobility afterwards. And you can see I have the short sprinters, hybrid sprinters, long sprinters, and then this year I didn't have long sprinters because they were all at the cross-country crew at this point. Tempo then, general pre-comp. This is again tempo. This would have been a max velocity day because the tempos are getting faster. So we're still in the tempo world, so we're still at upper 80%, but that starts to get closer to special endurance, so therefore the warm-ups need to be a little bit more intense because the intensities are going up. So we did the max velocity warm-up, we did some higher intensity tempo runs over certain distances. We did a shin circuit and a glute circuit with some bands afterwards. And then this was a Tuesday, so we didn't lift because we only lift on neuromuscular days, or tried to at least. And then competition sessions. These would be, now this turns into race modeling, which is the special endurance. So that's where the two ends have met at this point. So we're pretty much high intensity or recovery type stuff during the season. And then recovery sessions. Okay, we're doing well on time here. Recovery sessions then, early general prep, a lot of circuit-based stuff. Circuits, general strength, putting yourself in weird positions, trying to hold different positions. We're working on coordination, flexibility, all that good stuff. We did a circuit at the end with some tempo runs involved. Again, short tempo, like 80 meters at 70%, do an exercise, walk back. 80 meters, 70%, do an exercise, walk back. As we get more specific we'll start to introduce some other things into those circuits that are a little bit more specific to racing. So the positions that we'll be in, we're still working on building through that though, and we'll have some lighter plyometrics on recovery days. Recovery days during practice, during pre-comp. Now this is where we built through aerobic work. So now I still touch on aerobic work for recovery days. So we did some really light 150s and 200s, continuous twos for the long sprint group. But they're at really light paces, 60, 70% type paces, and just kind of working through some positions with some general strength. And then recovery during practice, this is a pool workout that we did, and then this would have been a recovery type lift that we might do, or a recovery type circuit that we did in the weight room. So where I have a much bigger screen, it takes me a little bit longer because I go through this a little bit more specifically, but I know half you can't see this. So we are already done, which is good. That was still about 45 minutes. So if you have any questions, let me know. This is my info. Again, you can message me at any point. Again, it might take me a few days to get back during the season, but that QR code is also for a newsletter that I just started putting out. So there's only 1 month out, but it's a monthly deal on different training talks and topics and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to add to that. If we have any questions, we can ask them. If not, you guys can come up more individually, and that works well. Question?
When you flash your extensive credentials up there, one towards the bottom, you did like level 1 for RPR.
Yeah.
Which you talk about stuff that's wild on Twitter.
Yeah.
That'd be one of them. Could you
Super
speak
wild.
briefly about RPR, your take on it, and maybe its applicability to sprint training?
Yeah, I mean, I think RPR is, so I did it because our strength staff did it. And so I wanted to go and just be versed on it. I think it's good, active release type stuff, trigger point type stuff. I leave that more for our athletic training staff. Being at a big state school, we don't really ever like touch the kids unless as a coach. So I don't do any sort of manual therapy on them or massage them. That's the athletic trainer's deal. So private schools you get away with that, but not at a big state school. So with that being said, that's mostly our trainers doing that. I did used to use it in warm-ups and stuff, but I feel like it's one of those things that the kids either take or they don't. Not to sound negative, but in high school I feel like it can be a little bit more like, okay, we're doing this. But in college, if I have like a 25-year-old transfer that looks at me, he's like, what the hell are you talking about? You know? And so I think it's useful, but I think it's also a little psychological as well. So what is it? Reflexive performance reset? Is that RPR? So again, it's something that's been kind of commercialized by Chris Horfist and Cal Dietz from the U of M. So I think it's beneficial. Now, I think it's more of a athletic training setup, though, where you would see a majority of that. And our trainers are certified in it and dry needling and all that. But yeah, I used to do full explanations and do all the tricks and show them all that. And some people thought it was cool, and other people were like, okay, let's just get to practice, please. I have a class to go to or something. So, so I don't think I'd do the other levels, but I think it's beneficial to know. So. Yeah. Anything else? Either it was a lot of good info or you all thought it was dumb. So, so either way, I'm here if you guys have any questions, but I appreciate you guys. I got to jet out of here probably within 15, 20 minutes. The rest of our staff is doing all the meat stuff, which is nice, but I got to get back for our athletes here. So.
And all 3 of your presentations, the slides will be shared?
All 3 should. I sent it to Johnny Josephson, who does all of it. They should be sent out, or...
We've got, what we're going to do is we've got the videotape, that's what we're doing here, and then that will be on the site.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
then we also, any other supplemental material will just be added on, and it's the clinic site.
Yep.
So,
So I sent all the slides to them. So if they're not on there or anything, just message me and I can get you the slides. So. Cool? All right. I appreciate it, everyone.
thank you.